Hi, welcome to our podcast. I'm Mary Abazia, and of course, with me is Tom Spitali and Sean Wellham. And we have been working with a lot of clients, and one theme and one word just keeps coming up, which is uncertainty. And the way that we look at uncertainty, if you're planning strategy or if you're putting together your product plans, it's really hard right now to figure out what to put on that paper and what to start to lead your organization to do, because there is so much chaos and where things may go with tariffs and other things. So we're going to really go deeper into how you use scenario planning in AI as some of the approaches you may want to consider. So Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you to open this Pandora's box.
I know I'm so unused to getting the microphone handed first. I'm not sure what to say. One thing that strikes me about uncertainty is that it always becomes popular right after some chaos has been unleashed. People seem to care more about uncertainty after COVID has put the world into its homes and lockdowns, and after the 27 financial crisis has nearly melted the financial system. And I know we are strictly apolitical in our podcast, but just imagine somebody crazily like shook down the whole world order in terms of common sense economy. Imagine something like that happened. Then people all of a sudden get very nervous about predicting the future. But the truth is, it's always uncertain, right? Degrees of uncertainty. You never know. Fortunes are made and lost by getting that assumption of the future wrong or right. In our planning tools, in our strategy workshops, we have always pretty much lead off with uncertainty. We look at some of the assumptions that are being made around the markets and challenging people to think about how could the future be different in a meaningful way? What if your customers had an alternative? What if there was a regulatory change in your particular market? What if there was a deregulation and more competitors came in? And we encourage people to think like this constantly, not just after a major event, but generally. We often say you can't predict the future. That's impossible, but you can reduce your vulnerability to being surprised by the future. And that's really the essence of our tools. Or as GE famously said after getting stung in the 2007 crisis, we have to get better at seeing around corners was the message. Not sure we ever solved that particular one, but so that's how I see uncertainty. It's popular when things happen, but it's a constant anyway. And smart strategy always considers the volatility of what might happen in the future. And I guess what's changed maybe is we have more tools now than we had before.
Yeah. I think that's my cue to talk about AI and how AI is helping us help people. Um, we are very careful, not as Sean said, to be apolitical. We're also very careful not to make this podcast a commercial for our services. But I am going to say that there's a lot of people in the world that have brilliant prognostication powers about looking at the past and using that to predict future and patterns and just great insights. And there's no shortage of those. I like a guy named George Friedman, who's a geopoliticist who I found to be very accurate in his predictions in the future. And like George, many others out there that are brilliant will tell you like what they think is going to happen, which is great. But what you really need is some tools to take what you ultimately decide or who you ultimately decide is right about the future or the scenarios that you think are going to be right and figure out what you as a company are going to do about them. And so our tools, the things that we've been helping companies do is kind of settle and align on, well, what is at least the range of scenarios? Sean, you talked about scenario planning. And what is the range of scenarios that we all agree could be in the realm of possibility? And then what are we going to do about those different scenarios so that we can watch and as any of them become evident, we have a strategic plan that fully leverages it or mitigates the downsides of those scenarios. And we are 2 to 3 steps ahead of the game and seeing around corners, as Sean said. What AI brings to all of this, we're still doing the same things that we've always done using the planning assumptions and trends tools and value proposition tools that we've always used. But what AI is bringing is an unprecedented ability for us to bring to our clients a better ability to see the different ranges of the future. For example, we're going to do some scenario planning here in the future for some charitable organizations. We now can say, well, what does George Friedman think is a range of future scenarios, politically, economically, socially? What is I saw Ray Dalio, the famous finance guy, talking about what he thinks is going to happen in the financial markets in the immediate future, at least what are the scenarios if certain things happen. So what's great about it is now we can bring such a wider variety of perspectives to people so that they can agree on what are the subsets of all these brilliant people's thinking that we think are defined scenarios that we believe could happen. And then we, help them to kind of figure out how to plan for those different scenarios. And it's fascinating, fun, and really maybe more important than ever. Don't you think, Mary?
Yeah, I'm going to build on what you're saying. I I really like doing scenario planning sessions for a couple of reasons. When, like what you're saying, is we prepare by having people really start to think about it ahead of coming into a session. And the AI allows, like you said, to prompt them to think even wider. Wider the better. Because you don't really know which corner is going to get you. I mean, Weight Watchers just filed for bankruptcy. And, I'm surprised they lasted that long. So that corner was, the magic shot or the magic pill for a while. And, unless they changed something else, they were going down. So that a point that, they probably weren't looking at shots and, as a competitor. So the broader, the better. Once people come in, you want to invite a very diverse group, people that you normally wouldn't talk to, you want to have in this type of a session because your goal is to categorize, prioritize, and then define what actions are going to take place. And you categorize by using our tool, which says, how much impact could that have on our business, high or low, not good or bad, but high or low. And then what's the probability, what's the time frame for this happening? And the ones that are, really big, but may take a while should take a second look because those sometimes slide fast over and become, like today's problem. so making sure that you use that, and then it helps you prioritize, and then making sure that the group really does identify, so what does this mean to us? What can we do in the short run? What do we need to do in the middle? And then longer term, we probably need to plan a whole lot more too. So I really like using a discipline and using a really diverse set of people along with the tools and the AI.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've learned running many of these sessions is we find it quite hard to think beyond what we expect. We don't tend to think of the unexpected so much, which is an important part of planning. Most of the things that trigger people into thinking about scenario planning or de-risking the future or predicting the future is because something bad has happened. You may remember, Tom, I think I was working with you. We worked with a medical diagnostics company right in the sweet spot of testing for viruses, and they never considered the possibility of a global pandemic, for example, because it was probably deemed as not expected in the low probability. But that single event had would have and did have a massive effect, in actually a positive effect because of the demand for the services. And it always struck me that we're all there thinking about, oh, what happens if inflation goes up 10% or if there's a change of government. We think in expected, we don't think in unexpected. Part of what we do with tools, and I think Tom AI can help with this also, is we we have these quadrants, right? I mean, not to go too deep into the tool, but we say what would have a massive impact, but is a very low probability. And we don't say ignore those, right? We say focus on the high impact, high probability, sure. But you've also got to say, what if it's high impact but low probability. In that case, you're just saying, how would we react? What would we do if this came to pass? A sort of contingency plan. You don't build your plan around the assumption. You just build it around you're de-risking it if it should happen. And that's an element of scenario planning that probably doesn't give enough attention, but I think can get much easier to do with an AI agent rather than a person. Tom, do you agree?
I do agree, and you're right, Sean. The idea a lot of people have is if it's low probability, then we'll just deal with it if it happens. But we do have this recent evidence that that's why so many people were caught unawares. I have to say this. I've said this on an earlier podcast, but it was a long time ago, and it's relevant to the topic. I think that this discipline that we're talking about right now, especially aided by AI, is something that helps you be lucky in business because our own experience here was that back around 2014, 2015, as an organization, the three of us and a couple other people in our organization at the time all, finally came to the conclusion that technology was going to create a demand for virtual training. And back, over the next couple of years, we started investing in our own capabilities to be able to, we put our toolkit online. We looked into, the Zoom equivalents and tried to figure out, well, if we have to, do virtual training, we better have some tools that can do it. And we invested in all that, and it all sat dormant for a little while, you know? And we're like, hey, did we make a faulty investment here because there wasn't the same level of demand that we thought for these things. Well, then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we had not, as a company also, we're not in that business, so we hadn't thought about a global pandemic in our own planning assumptions. But when it hit, it had the same impact as this demand for virtual training we thought was going to have in its own right. And so what I like to say is we got lucky, but we're not really lucky. We made the preparations, and when COVID hit, we were ahead of the game and ready for everyone who was demanding that. And it taught me, I think it taught all of us that this idea of having a trends discipline, you might not get it exactly right, but the process of planning for a range of futures is really important when something truly unexpected happens, even if you're trying to anticipate the unexpected. You're going to miss something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. There was an analogy. I mean, our company is over 40 years old, and some of the founders that started this had this visual, and they had this solid bridge, and then they had a pontoon bridge. And I remember them saying, we would love to be able to sit here in this room and start to plan out and have this solid, plan from here to there, like the bridge that we know we're going to be able to make these assumptions. And they said, but actually doing strategy is like walking on a pontoon bridge because it keeps moving, as you're walking across and you're creating these assumptions and plans, it keeps shifting. And so, to have that kind of mindset, as we all are saying, that, it is uncertain and, expect it to move. So it's hard enough to build a strategy. And then we're saying, and then have a plan B or a plan C is a good idea. So that's, especially in these uncertain times, it spend an extra hour and do those other two while you're at it. So
it's often said that, when you hire some consultants, basically the plan is a binder that sits on the shelf and never gets used. And we position ourselves as, against that and say, look, what we're doing is really, really practical. But there is a call for a binder that sits on a shelf and maybe never gets used. And that is the plan to mitigate against the scenario that maybe never happens. It's worth it. And, it's a good insurance policy. And that's what ends up here is sometimes, the only thing you can do about a potentially negative scenario is just say, these are some of the things that we're going to do to mitigate our losses in such a scenario. But wow, to have that thought through in case that scenario happens, or like I described, something different happens than what we thought, but it has the same impact as that scenario, like we had with, virtual training and COVID. It's good to have that binder, even if you never use it. It's a insurance policy, so to speak.
That's a good point. Sean, any final thoughts?
I think Tom summed it up really well. It's that scenario planning is not just about planning for what you expect, it's creating that plan B for what you think might happen and don't want to happen, but you're prepared for it. Because if that affects everyone, the most prepared will do the best out of that situation if you're prepared. So yeah, have that plan B binder and hopefully it does gather dust and nothing else.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us and good luck. We hope that you take a few things from this to build your plans. Thank you.